Hi, and welcome to this quarter's webinar on how to build a template for a legal brief. A couple of notes before we get started. First, although this is a pre-recorded presentation, I will be attending the premiere of this live on YouTube to answer questions in the chat. If you don't make it to the premiere, feel free to leave your questions in the comments below. Second, for the feature demonstrations, I'm using what is, at the time of recording this, the latest version, desktop version of Word in Office 365. However, because I've taught on some of the features before, I'll be substituting some earlier video for one or two sections, so you may see some slight differences in the interface. The instructions, however, will be the same for anyone using Word 2019, and they'll probably be the same for anyone using a reasonably recent desktop version of Word. Alright, let's get into it. So I received an email from a reader named Sybil, who's enrolled in my Brief Builders workshop. And as she was going through the lessons on how to build an automated table of contents, it occurred to her that there must be a way to build a particular TOC and TOA format into a template so she doesn't have to redefine those elements every single time she creates a new brief. And of course the answer is, of course you can. Regardless of whether you're starting with a prior brief that you've formatted to your court's requirements or you're starting from scratch, the first thing we're going to do is save the template before we start building or modifying it. That'll ensure that we're not overwriting a prior brief and we're saving everything into our template. We'll also talk about where you should think about storing your template to make it as easily accessible as possible. If your court's requirements mandate different page formats for different sections, say page numbers are different between the preliminaries and the body of the brief, I'll show you how and why to insert section breaks and break the links between sections to create independent headers, footers, and page numbering schemes. Then we'll move on to the various styles that are the basis of the formatting you want to save in your template to minimize the amount of reformatting you have to do with each brief. We'll set the basic fonts, then drill down into the 9 levels of headings to set font and paragraph settings. We'll also format the 9 levels of table of contents styles and the 2 table of authority styles. Then, if there are any static elements like a basic signature block, certificate of service, etc., we'll cover some of the formatting specifics for those. Let's start with learning about templates. First, let's talk about what a template is and how you'd use it. In Microsoft Word, there are 2 different template file types. Macro-enabled templates, which use the file extension .dotm, and non-macro-enabled templates ending in .dotx. Since we're not building any sort of macro to use with this template, it's the latter format we'll be talking about today, the .dotx file. Saving a Word document as a .dotx file is pretty straightforward. It's just another file type in the drop-down. However, where you save it will determine how accessible it is from within Word. Ideally, you want to be able to click File, New, and see a list of your personal templates up here you can choose from. That location is in 2 settings within Word Options down here at the bottom left. Once you're in Options, click Save on the left, and your personal templates file location is here. If there's not a file path already listed here, you either need to put the correct file path here for a folder you've already designated, or you can determine where Word, by default, stores your templates. For many Windows users, the most logical location is where their normal template is stored. To find that, type % appdata /Microsoft/templates into the address bar in Windows File Explorer. After you type that, press Enter, and Windows will take you directly to the folder where your normal Word template is located. Another alternative, if you're using OneDrive, is your Custom Office Templates folder. You can navigate to your OneDrive folder and under Documents, find a folder called Custom Office Templates within it. Again, click into the address bar in File Explorer and use Ctrl-C to copy that path. Regardless of which location you use, you'll want to copy that file path into 2 locations in Word. First, in Options, remember, You get there by clicking File, Options. Go to Save and use Ctrl-V to paste that path into the default Personal Templates location. Then go to Advanced. Scroll all the way down until you see a button called File Locations. Then click User Templates, Modify, and paste that path into that address bar and click OK. Customizing both of these template locations ensures your templates are being accessed from the right location. By the way, if you're looking for a way to enforce a set template firm-wide for storing templates on a network drive, I will tell you that's beyond the scope of this video. There are some variables involved vis-a-vis your Word and Windows installation and your network setup that I cannot go into here. Please consult your IT person for assistance on that front. At this point, I'm going to insert a tutorial I did on this subject a couple of years ago, rather than referring you to that tutorial elsewhere on my channel. Those of you who are using the very latest version of Word 2019 may notice some minor differences in the Word interface, the most obvious of which is that the tab that used to be labeled Header and Footer Tools is now just called Header and Footer. None of these differences is significant. The process is the same now as it was then. In the following section, I'll show you why your document might need section breaks. Then I'll show you how to insert them and how to insert page numbers that are formatted differently by section. The main concept you've got to get your head wrapped around is that for each independently numbered section of your brief, you've got to have 2 or more independent sections. To create those, you need to insert what Word calls a section break. It's sort of like a page break, but with special properties. So in this example, the cover page has no page number. But the pages in the preliminary section, containing your table of contents, etc., does have page numbers. So you'd need a section break between that cover page and the first page of your preliminary section to create 2 independent sections that can number independently. The same is true of the break between the preliminaries and the brief proper. Insert a section break, so you can then start numbering your brief proper with Arabic numerals. But once you insert your section breaks, you still have to ensure your sections are independent. By default, sections are linked so that the headers, footers, and other formatting information gets repeated. That comes in handy in some situations, but in this one, not so much. Before we insert a page number in any page footer, we have to both insert the section breaks and break the links between each section to ensure each section's page numbering is truly independent. I'm going to keep it simple here and demonstrate this in a blank document. First, let's insert the section break. I'm going to go up to the Layout tab. I'm in version 2019. In some earlier versions, this is called the Page Layout tab. And in the Page Setup command group under Breaks, I'm going to insert Next Page Section Break. And I'll scroll back up and show you what a section break looks like here. This is going to start a new section on a new page. Now I have 2 sections in my blank document. Section 1 is page 1, and section 2 is page 2. As I showed you before, I'm going to leave page numbering off the first page because that will eventually be my unnumbered cover page. But for section 2, I'm going to want to start the page numbering with a lowercase Roman numeral I. I'm going to double-click into the footer section, and you'll notice on the left it identifies this as the footer for section 2. But over here on the right it says Same as Previous. What that does is it carries over anything from section 1's footer over into section 2. We don't want that. To break that link, we're going to go into the Header and Footer Tools, which popped up as soon as I double-clicked into the footer. You'll notice that Link to Previous is enabled. You can tell that because it's a bit darker. That's the link we want to break. So I'll just click on that, and that will toggle that setting off. I'm also going to make sure that the different first page box is unchecked, because we want all the pages of this section to have the same footer formatting. Now that I've made these two sections completely independent, I can put my page number in. While I could go over to the Insert tab to do this, I can also stay right here in Header and Footer Tools. All the way over on the left, I'm going to click Page Number and choose Current Position, Plain Number. I tend to prefer that over using top of page or bottom of page, because inserting a page number using one of those methods tends to put the page number in a text box, which can sometimes interfere with other elements in the header or footer, such as document management system stamps. So now I've placed my page number on the page, but it's the wrong number, should be 1, and the wrong kind of number, should be Roman rather than Arabic. So I right-click on the number and choose Format Page Numbers. Here I can start the numbering over at 1, and I can change the number format from Arabic to lowercase Roman numerals. Then I can go up to Header and Footer Tools, the Design tab, and close the footer. Now let's create section 3. Again, I go to the Layout tab, choose Breaks, and click Next Page Section Break. It's the same set of steps. Double-click into the footer. Break the link between Section 2 and Section 3 by toggling off Link to Previous. And then right-click on the page number. Choose Format Page Numbers. Correct the page number format. It's already restarting at 1 at the new section. And then click OK. So now my document has 3 sections. The first section has no numbering. The second one has lowercase Roman numeral page numbers. And the third one has Arabic numbers. Each section starts its page numbering back at 1. At this point, we're going to start dealing with styles at the most basic level, the heading and body fonts. If the default font in your documents doesn't meet the court standards, you can change it, but we need to change the fonts from the ground up, starting with the 2 most basic styles, plus body and plus headings. The settings for these then cascade down to other styles, such as normal, the 9 heading styles, footnote text, etc. Alright, let's start with saving the styles for the body and heading fonts. We're going to go over to the Design tab, and over here under Fonts, you'll see all these theme fonts. Now, right now I'm in the default Office one, which is the Calibri and Calibri Light, and I'm going to create a new one of these theme fonts by going down to Customize Fonts, and I'm going to reset the heading font first of all to Times New Roman, and obviously you can pick any of the fonts that you need to, any of the ones that fit the court's requirements. And I'm also going to reset the body font to Times New Roman. And then I can save this as a new themes font. So now under Custom, I have a Times New Roman theme font. Now I can also set the default paragraph spacing. I can go to Custom Paragraph Spacing, and I can say, for example, I want it to always be single spaced. And you notice I'm in the headings one right now. And I can set this before and after at whatever I need to. Say put 6 points before and 12 points after, for example. I'm going to find the plus body and do the same thing there. And then once I'm finished there, double check. I can make sure that I have the right size font as well, and that the font color is always black. If you set automatic and you go up here to some of these colors, if somebody goes up here to some of these colors and sets another color scheme, it will adopt it from there. So we're going to just want the text to be black. And then here, I'm going to select this radio button that says New Documents based on this template. And I'm going to click OK. So I have my Times New Roman as the new custom base font for both the headings and the body text. And then I have my paragraph spacing set custom. So those changes will cascade down to other styles in your style sets. So this is what I mean by setting the styles kind of from the ground up. That's the first level of styles we need to reset. Now that we've set the basic font set we'll be dealing with for the body text and the headings, it's time to refine the heading styles. If you're working from a prior example brief, you may still want to double check to ensure you've got all the necessary settings in place. Bold or not bold, centered versus not centered, automatic numbering, etc. Plus, I would argue that you always want to set Keep with Next in the paragraph level formatting to keep headings from being separated from their following paragraphs. When you're getting ready to style your headings, you want to consider not only how they'll look in your brief, but how they'll look in your table of contents. For instance, would you want your headings to be in all caps and bold in the brief, but in title case and not bold in the TOC? Here's where mapping out your heading and TOC styles in advance in your template is going to become crucial. To modify the 9 heading styles, you'll need to be in the Modify Style dialog box. There are 2 ways to get there. The fastest way is to click the drop-down that appears when you hover over a particular style in the Styles pane. And you get to the Styles pane by clicking this launcher arrow in the Styles area. Then when you hover over a particular style in the Styles pane, you've got a drop-down here, and then you can choose Modify, which will take you directly to the Modify Style dialog box with that style already chosen. Another way is to click the Manage Styles button at the bottom of the Styles pane, which will take you to the Manage Styles dialog box. You've got a bit more flexibility here with some settings, and as you did with the Styles pane options dialog box, you'll want to be sure you're seeing all styles in alphabetical order with Show Recommended Styles unchecked. Then you can scroll up or down to find the heading style you want to modify. Click the Modify button, and you'll be in the Modify Style dialog box. Now that I'm in the Manage Styles dialog box and see all my headings in one place, I'm going to work from here. But know that there is a faster way to get to the Modify Style dialog box from the Styles pane. Now, as I mentioned, you want to map out how you're going to want your headings formatted, both in the brief itself and in the table of contents. You may want different formatting in different places. In fact, just to illustrate, I'm going to switch over to my finished template and demonstrate how this would work. As I scroll through the brief, my level 1 headings all look like they're typed in all caps, but they're not. They were actually typed in as title case, meaning each word has its initial letter capitalized with the rest in lowercase. And as I go to my table of contents, you'll see that these headings are, in fact, in title case. So how are they showing in all caps in the brief? It's because the heading 1 styles font settings dictate that the text be transformed to all caps and bold. So when I actually type a heading into the body of my brief, I make sure I'm typing it in whatever case I want it to appear in my table of contents, in this example in title case. Here, let me retype one of the headings, the Table of Authorities heading, with my caps lock turned on. And then I'll refresh the table of contents and show you how that changes. See how that changed how the text displays in the table of contents? Now I'm going to switch that heading back to title case and refresh the table of contents again. Okay, I'm back in my unfinished template now with some test text typed into it, and we'll start talking about how you can revise the settings for your headings. Now you're all going to have your own preferences as to how things look, whether the text is bold and/or underlined and or italicized, whether the headings are centered or not, whether they're numbered or not. I'll show you where you can reset those kinds of settings, and you can experiment on your own. But first I want to show you some settings that I recommend for everyone. These are not so much formatting settings as they are functional settings. First, for the headings, I always recommend you set Keep with Next. This is a paragraph setting that keeps your headings from being separated by a soft page break from the next paragraph. I see a lot of people try to solve this problem by putting extra hard returns in their document, which to me makes later editing a real pain in the neck. Instead of trying to compensate for the problem, why not just solve it and be done with it? To set Keep with Next, click the Format drop-down in the Modify Style dialog box and choose Paragraph. That's going to take you into the Paragraph dialog box. On the Line and Page Breaks tab, check the box next to Keep with Next. If you anticipate your headings may contain more than one line, you may also want to check Keep Lines Together. Over on the Indents and Spacing tab, there's another group of settings I recommend. Space before and after the heading, and don't add space between paragraphs of the same style. I usually like to put about 1 line's worth of space after each heading and perhaps a half line's or a line's worth of space before. That keeps me from having to put in an extra hard return before and after headings. Checking the Don't Add Space Between Paragraphs of the Same Style box allows me to put hard returns within a multi-line heading without creating extra space between the lines if the heading would otherwise have that extra space before and after. Notice too that although you can set the alignment of that heading style directly in the Modify Style dialog box using the buttons here, you can also set alignment, center, left, etc. here at the top in the Indents and Spacing tab. Near the bottom you can set your preferred line spacing for your heading under Line Spacing, and you can preview your settings in the preview window. Click OK to finish. Another setting I like to ensure is set in stone is the color of the headings. If someone else is using your template and for some crazy reason decides to go over to the Design tab and switch color schemes, you want to prevent that from impacting the heading styles. In the Modify Style dialog box, click the Font Color drop-down, and instead of Automatic, which would inherit a color from whatever color scheme has been chosen, choose black. Just lock that down. If your headings are to be uniformly numbered throughout, you would choose Numbering under the Format drop-down in the Modify Style dialog box. Notice I said uniformly numbered. What I mean by that is whatever numbering scheme you choose here is going to be applied to all of the headings of that level throughout the entire brief, regardless of what section it's in. Which would mean that, for example, your Table of Authorities heading would have a number before it, your Table of Contents heading would have a number before it, etc. if you're using heading 1 throughout. If that's what you want, you can choose that here. However, if all you want is numbering for the various points and subpoints in the main body of the brief, you're going to want to do that differently. And numbered headings will be the subject of an entirely different webinar later. Now it's rinse and repeat for the remainder of the headings. Again, it's helpful to have some sample text available so you can see the result of your settings. You can always delete the sample text when you're done. Remember to save your template periodically, and if you need to set it aside and come back to editing it later, open it directly from the folder in which you've saved it, rather than opening it within Word. Now that we've taken care of the heading styles, let's move on to the TOC styles. These are the styles that control how the table of contents entries look, and this formatting can be independent from how the headings in the brief itself look. For example, you may have a certain level heading in italics in your brief, but you may want it to not be in italics in the table of contents. Also, like the heading styles, you'll want to plan how each level of TOC entry is indented. Like the heading styles, there are 9 total to work on. As with the heading styles, Word has 9 levels of TOC styles. These are the styles that control how each entry in the table of contents appear. The font size, type and style, i.e. regular, bold, italic, or underlined, how much each level is indented from the left margin, etc. As I demonstrated earlier, these are independent from your heading style, so if your level 1 headings are in all caps and bold, the corresponding TOC style can be in title case, assuming that's the way you type them into the brief, and not bold. One thing you won't have to set in your TOC styles is the presence or absence and appearance of any sort of leader character leading from the end of the entry to the right margin where the page number appears, or whether page numbers appear at all, or how many levels of headings are listed within the TOC. Those settings are actually controlled within the Table of Contents dialog box. If you need instruction on how to insert a table of contents using either heading styles or TOC markup, click the link above or in the description below for a full tutorial. As we did before, we're going to open up the Styles pane by clicking on the launcher arrow in the lower right-hand corner of the Styles area of the Home tab. If you haven't already done this, be sure to click the Options button on the bottom and go to the Style pane Options dialog box to make sure you're seeing all styles in alphabetical order, and that the checkboxes directly underneath Select Formatting to Show as Styles are unchecked to avoid cluttering the Styles pane. Once you've done that, you should be able to scroll down to the group of TOC styles and begin modifying the styles. Again, you can reach the Modify Style dialog box for each style in one of 2 ways. Either by clicking the Manage Styles button at the bottom of the Styles pane, next to the Options button, then finding each style in that list and clicking the Modify button, or by clicking the drop-down next to each style in the Style pane and choosing Modify. Whichever way you get there, you can now modify each style according to your preferences. A few things you'll want to be mindful of. 1. How much space Word should insert before and after each entry. In the Paragraph dialog box, you may want to insert just a bit of space, say 6 points, after each entry to give them a little bit of breathing room on the page, or you may want to tighten things up to save space in the brief. How much to indent each level of TOC entry. You may find that there's a default indentation increment for each level. In this example, the indentation is already set at 0.25. Just be sure that you're incrementing by a consistent amount for each level and that your test text looks the way that you want it to. Line spacing can be set in the Paragraph dialog box as well. Click OK to save your settings in the Paragraph dialog box. At this point, you could change some settings in the Font dialog box by clicking Format, Font in the lower left-hand corner of the Modify Style dialog box. Here is where you could set some small caps or all caps if that's your preference. You can set bold, underline, and italic here, or you can set that within the Modify Style dialog box itself. Click OK to finish. And then move on to the next TOC style. If you don't want your table of contents heading to appear in your table of contents, assuming you're using heading styles to populate the table of contents, you'll want to apply the style TOC heading to it. First, however, let's make sure it looks like the rest of the heading 1 entries. You could reset everything manually as you've done with the other styles, or you could do this. With the table of contents heading currently styled as heading 1, select it, then find the TOC heading style in the Styles pane. Click the drop-down on the right, and click Update TOC Heading to match selection. In that one click, you've basically copied all of the settings inherent in the Heading 1 style to the TOC heading style. Now that you've done that, when you refresh the table of contents, the heading Table of Contents will disappear. If it doesn't, be sure that TOC heading is not one of the styles listed in the Table of Contents Options dialog box. So far, we've modified 18 plus different styles, so you've gotten a lot of exposure to the process. We have 2 more styles to go: the style that controls Table of Authority section headings, and the style that controls the entries themselves. There's only one of each of those, so you're in the home stretch. Alright, we've got the vast majority of the styles already restyled in the way that we want them. Now we have 2 more to go, and that's going to be the heading and the entry styles for the Table of Authorities. So again, I'm on the Home tab, and under Styles, I'm going to click that launcher arrow, and we actually have 2 different styles. There's one for the Table of Authorities entries, and then there's one for the Table of Authorities headings. So let's look at the heading one first. And again, you can go through the Manage Styles dialog box and find these, or you can go into that styles list. TOA heading, modify, and it's going to be 12 point and bold. If you want to underline it, you can do that here. If you want to set some space after or before, you can do that here. You're probably not going to do any sort of indentation, and they're going to be left aligned. And again, the keep with next, etc. is really not important in this particular context. And it's always going to be a one-line heading, so you don't need to worry about the don't add space. So that's going to take care of the TOA heading. Now we need to find the Table of Authorities. Now the Table of Authorities entries are going to pick up a lot of the formatting from the Table of Authorities markup. Whenever you mark a case within the brief, it will pick up the italics from the case name, etc. So you probably want to leave a lot of this alone. But you may want a little bit of space between the entries, or you may want them single spaced. And there is going to be probably a hanging indent already set here, and you can control the amount of space here if you want to put a 1/4 inch there, etc. So I can apply TOA heading here. And so that's going to be the heading that will say cases, statutes, other authorities, etc. And then the TOA entry is going to be the table of authority style. And again, that's going to pick up a lot of this formatting from the actual TOA entries in your brief, and also have that dot leader. Now that we've got all the styles configured to our liking, we can embed some actual text in our document, the kinds of things that would be common in any brief you submit to that court, like the signature block sends the client-specific information, the certificate of service, at least the basic language and form, and the cover page, without the actual parties, of course. I'll show you some tricks that I think make these elements easier to work with when it comes time to type in case-specific information. All right, there are going to be some elements that every brief in a particular court is going to have. In this particular example, which is based off of a typical 11th Circuit appellate brief, there's going to be a cover page, and then there's going to be a preliminary section, which is why we did the sectioning thing earlier. And then there's going to be some things at the end, the word count perhaps, or the certificate of service, or something like that. So we're going to start building those elements and putting those in there so that you always have at least a skeleton of those things where you can put these case-specific information in there. Now, if you have a prior brief to work from, or you have one you can copy from, that's really ideal. I'm going to switch over to one that I have and just copy some elements from it. So here's the cover page on this one. And let me shrink that down a little bit so I can see that. So you see that I've got the section break here, so that's going to be section 1. I'm going to copy all of this element without picking up the section break, and then just copy it. And then switch over here, and using my paste button, my paste options button, I can say I can keep the source formatting, or I can attempt to merge the formatting, etc. So I'm going to keep the source formatting. All of this is going to be in 14 points, so I can always go back and change that if I need to. And then depending on how much of this is going to be skeleton versus how much of this is going to be case specific, you can always pull out anything that's case specific. You can leave the names in here if you need to, or depending on whether this is always going to be used for the same attorney or attorneys, or you can pull these things out and leave your law firm information in here, etc. But you kind of get the drill here. So that takes care of my cover page. I've got my preliminaries section, and again I'm going to switch over to that other brief. And this one always requires a corporate disclosure statement, a certificate of interested persons, and then we've got the table of contents and table of authorities. I'm going to pick up everything down to the section break. And you could build this from scratch if you wanted to, but to me this is just easier. And then again, I can paste this in. And this is a good test of what the styles are going to look like. So you can pull out these elements here. Obviously this is boilerplate text that I have in my sample brief. So I can pull all of that out. And again, depending on whether the same person is always going to be using this versus multiple people, you can pull this information out as well. And there, I'm going to want to make sure there's no space there. And make sure there's no space there. So there'll be some little formatting things that you want to make sure are taken care of here. Now here is an interesting element. This is a word count. And you can set that as a word count for the entire brief if you wanted to. If you go to Insert, Quick Parts, Field, and I think that's under Document Information, Num Words. Now, the limitation here is that this is counting the entire brief. It is not counting some of it or the relevant portion of it, which is usually what the rule wants you to do. So you may not want to use that field, and I've actually got a video on how the word count actually works and how you might want to make sure that you don't run into this problem with it counting words that it shouldn't be counting. So I'm going to leave that blank, but I'm going to point to that video in the card in the upper right hand corner. And again, a little bit of formatting cleanup to do there. And here's our table of contents, just a placeholder for it. And then table of authorities, and obviously we want to pull all of that specific information out, as well as the heading, because that's going to be automatically generated. So now we're into the sort of brief proper. And I'm going to skip down a couple of spaces and actually put a page break, and we'll start on the certificate of service. And again, since I have a prior example, I'm just going to copy some information into this particular example. And again, a little bit of formatting cleanup here. And you could make this an automatically calculating date by going to the Insert tab, click on Quick Parts. Now I actually have this already formatted so that I can drop the today's date as an ordinal date into any paragraph. And I will point you to a video showing you exactly how to construct this so that it automatically recalculates. One of the things that I like to do in certificates of service is make sure that I have a table for the addresses. And you can do on the Insert tab, Table. If you have multiple addresses, you can do 2 columns and however many rows. But you can always add or subtract rows if you need to. First thing I'm going to do is select the table, and I'm going to turn off the borders because obviously we don't want borders in here. And you notice that these 2 tabs popped up automatically now that my cursor is in the table or I have the table selected. So that was on the Table Design tab where I turned off the borders. I'm going to go to the Layout tab, and under Properties, I'm going to indent this table about 1/2 inch. So that takes care of that. And then because I want the addresses to be separated a little bit, I don't want to have to put a hard return in between each of the rows. I'm going to go up here to Cell Margins. I'm going to uncheck this automatically resize to fit contents. And then on the bottom margin, I'm going to put 0.15 because that's about 1 line's worth of space. And that way there's a little bit of breathing room between each of the addresses. And again, I'm kind of genericizing this a bit. And so depending on the requirements of the court that you are practicing in front of, you may have some other static items that you need to make sure are inserted into your brief. But that's going to be it for that. And you may want to tweak that a bit as you go, and you may want to, I want to go there and get rid of some of that space. But you kind of get the drill here, where you want to just tweak some formatting and make sure that those elements are ready to go and ready to have some information typed into them. In fact, why don't I just take that entire paragraph out, because you'll probably write that as you go. But you might want to maybe print this out or look at it in print preview and just see if everything looks okay. If you've genericized everything that needs to be genericized. And there you have your template, and you can save it at that point and then close it. And then when you go back to File, New, if you put that in your Personal Templates location, when you click it, it will open up a brand new document with all of that in it. Now, if you ever need to alter your brief template, you're not going to be able to do it this way. You're not going to be able to go to File, New, and open it here, because that's just going to create a new document. What you're going to want to do is navigate to your template location in File Explorer, and don't double click on it, because again, that's going to just open up a new document based on that template. You're going to want to right click and open the template directly. You notice that now it says brieftemplate.dotx. That means you can edit the actual template as opposed to creating a new document based on that template. So always remember that. You're going to want to go back to your template location, right-click, and then open if you need to edit that template in the future. One thing I do want to mention is when you're inserting these generic elements, when you're inserting these sort of boilerplate elements, you want to be sure that you're applying styles where they need to be applied. For example, you're going to want this to show up in your table of contents. But right now, it's just styled with the normal style with some direct formatting applied on top of it. Instead, I want that to be heading 1. And again, Certificate of Interested Persons, the heading for that needs to be heading 1. Statement regarding oral argument, again, is a heading 1. So you'll want to go through your static elements and make sure that any styles that need to be applied to them for them to show up in your table of contents is actually styled correctly. All right, that's the end of today's webinar. I want to thank you so much for attending, particularly those who were able to attend live, and hopefully you're able to get something into the chat box and get a question answered. If you're attending after the fact or you have other questions or comments, be sure to leave them in the comments below the video. Also, if this particular video has helped you, would you do me a favor and hit the like button? That lets me and it lets YouTube know that this is something that you want to see more of. So again, thanks so much for attending. I hope this was helpful. Have a good day.